If we can minimize the stuff that we'll get.
Hello! Welcome.
Too casual. I was too casual.
Welcome to the Squirrel Spotlight.
Twitch
Tuesdays at 12.
I was about to say 2.
It's not 2 anymore, it's 12.
But welcome, gang.
Yes, welcome. As you can see, we have someone new here.
Hello.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Scott Army. I'm the lead character artist.
Yay!
Yay!
And as you recall, I'm maybe Dominic Camargo.
And I am Mimi Black.
Yeah.
And as you can see, I have a magazine.
Ooh.
It's Game Informer. It's the April issue of Game Informer, and our article's in it.
We did
What?
Yep.
No way.
Hero Looters.
See, we weren't lying. We were like, trust us, we're in Game Informer. Do you mean it for real? We're actually in it.
The digital issue's been out for a while, but
Right.
the actual paper publications have been trickling into GameStops. So I found this one this weekend. As you can see, it's all about drifters. And the digital issue is a 6-page spread, but this is a 4-page one. And
Because we have a lot of color.
yes, yeah.
They didn't say that. I don't know why. I'm just making that up. Please don't get mad at me.
We're too expensive.
Yeah.
And so there's
Hey, Star
also.
Wolf. Hey, Eric. So they're saying we sound kind of echoey. I don't know if you can hear that. He's on it. Eric's on it.
What?
Echoey?
We sound kind of echoey. I don't know.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay.
He's working on it.
We're on it, guys. We keep on making improvements. In case you can't see, the camera is obviously way better. We're doing these. What are
We
these
now
called?
have
Lapel
mics.
mics.
Oh, I'm the one that's echoey.
It's like we're an official news studio thingy,
Yes.
except no one here is professional.
Or
Or-
knows what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or has any news.
Actually, we might qualify.
We could. Well, yeah. By today's standards, we qualify. But yeah, so the article has, if you're interested, I've noticed some people like on our Twitter have been asking about the characters. Today we're going to talk about Resistor. You probably can't see this, but he's this guy here. But there's a little blurbs on 5 of the characters. Definitely not all of our characters. And their abilities definitely are, would you say they're changing a little bit?
That's a question to you.
I'm not a design.
So Scott's
So
new to
no.
this, so he's adapting to answering questions. So
Sure.
by
Sorry, that's a design pursuit.
All
That's
right,
not
yes, no.
that's not stuff for character art.
For character art. But yeah, so there's a bunch of cool stuff in here. There's a big article interview with our creative director, Hayden Dalton,
Yeah.
throughout it.
Yeah, it's a great read. It talks a little bit more about gameplay. I know via actually our Reddit and Discord channels that we've actually been getting a lot more questions about gameplay. I'm answering as much as I can, but I'm also trying to tease a lot, right? Like part of our plan on the streaming is to let you guys find out more information. So I apologize to those people that are on our subreddit and again on Discord that like I haven't been able to say a bunch. I've kind of been a little bit broad in answering questions. It's very much because we have a plan to reveal all that through the course of the streams. Also, I'm clearly heavily queuing our subreddit and Discord channel.
Yes.
So basically, we actually have quite a few fans, quite a few diehard fans that have actually already started a subreddit for us. So if you're a Redditor, you can go to r/driftersgame. And that's for us. Like it's all our Drifters games. It's to be clear, it's not managed by us. It's definitely great members of the community.
But we do put updates on there and stuff. So
and specifically, a shout out to Reddit users Sugar Me Timbers and Frosty. They're the two mods we have on the subreddit right now. So they also started up their Discord channel. So you can go into Discord, and I have that on my phone, which I'll be checking intermittently throughout. In case there's anyone live on there. So we'll be checking that out throughout the stream, which I think is great. It's another way to interact. So definitely go check that out. Again, reddit.com r/driftersgame. Make sure to do Drifters Game.
We put updates there, and then we also put updates, or we have the newsletter, which we mentioned last week. So if you go to driftersgame.com, there's an email list that you can sign up for, and we send updates through there.
Yeah. So lots of ways to get involved. We want to hear what you're thinking. I know you guys haven't been able to play the game, but again, we're building up to that. And the more we talk about characters, the more we talk about gameplay, we want to hear what you guys are thinking. Yes. And we want to be able to show you what you want to see. So please definitely check us out, and we'll get involved in that way. Yeah. So, cool.
Let's talk about Scott.
Let's talk about Scott.
Let's not.
So Scott, who are you? What's your role here?
So I'm the lead character artist, currently assigned to our internal IP. And so
you can say that what it is now. We've announced the game.
Drifters, sorry. So I'm the lead character artist on Drifters, and just handling day-to-day operations and helping the art director with task assignments and feedback loops and stuff like that.
So you're a lead. That's pretty cool. Does that mean? How did you get there? Did you ever have that in mind? How long were you doing character art before this?
You mean from the beginning, or?
Sure. Yeah.
So I started off doing art back in maybe 2001, and it was mostly at the behest of my wife at the time.
So this wasn't even in games.
Yeah,
so literally just art.
I was not in games. I was in biology and pharma companies.
Okay.
Yeah, so I worked on automation and robots and stuff like that. And
that's fun.
It isn't. And so I really...
hence you not being in that anymore?
Yeah, I really disliked it, and so I started going to some night school for media arts, and through that I met a person whose wife was a hairdresser of someone that worked at Blizzard, and...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a really weird, circuitous route to get in there, and so...
Did you start in art there, or did you start lower?
Yeah, no, way lower. I was in QA for almost 6 years.
Oh, see, there it is, QA paying off again. Great way to get into the industry.
It is, but it's a lot of work for sure. So I spent about 5.5 years there, and then I moved into their cinematic department and worked there for almost 4 years, and then was downsized. And so I came here.
Which is an unfortunate thing that happens a lot in the game industry.
Yeah, that's another thing that people should prepare for. But I landed here, and over the course of probably 7 or 8 projects, I had a proclivity for the character side of stuff. And
ooh, SAT word, proclivity.
So I sort of filled that role because no one else wanted to at the time. And I think at the time of BioShock was when we started staffing up and officially created a character team.
Mm.
And so I've just been associated with that ever since. So that would be 2014 or 2015, I guess.
Nice.
And so when you were at Blizzard, you were doing QA, and were you learning all of because there's a lot of programs that go into art, and were you learning stuff on the side there?
Yeah, it was all moonlighting, just sort of, you'd have friends who could get you the software, and it'd just be, QA till 8 or 9 at night, working a lot of overtime, and then just go home till 4 in the morning and churn out terrible models until 4 and then get up at 7 and go back to work. And just,
Oh no! Get up at 7?
Yeah.
It
was like 9 to 6 or 7, and back then that was right around the launch window of WoW.
Dang, son!
Yeah, like
he doesn't look that old, does he?
I know. The first thing I ever worked on there was they just finished Gold Master for Frozen Throne, so the expansion for the RTS.
No, real quick for our fans, can you tell them what Gold Master means?
It's just when they certify it ready to go into production. They've done all their testing and they're sending it off to be printed. And it's
a literal gold disc.
Yes.
Right?
Sure. Maybe. I don't know. I've never seen the disc.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
They used to have people who go and take the disc to a plant to, they go on a trip somewhere and physically bring the copy to somebody. Yeah. I was never one of those guys. I was just a tester guy. So. Yeah.
Very cool.
So, I guess with that, you've worked on a lot of games, both as a QA person as well as an artist.
Sure.
Do you have any that are in your top favorites for working on?
Working on? I guess WoW Classic was a really big one. Certainly, it was very...
Now, when you say WoW Classic, you mean like the original WoW?
Yeah, like
now there's officially WoW Classic. If you relaunched it,
like WoW from 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like
that when it came out.
Yeah,
I think it was 2004 when it launched. So that was a big one. I mean, that was the first real game that I got to work on. Really, I mean, I'd worked on Frozen Throne a little bit and a couple of Diablo patches, but no, that was a big one. And then StarCraft 2 is a big one, not for working on the game itself, but it was the first thing that I did the pre-rendered cinematics for. So that was the first thing where I got production experience and got to meet some really amazing artists. And then BioShock, obviously. I really like that game series and got to build the team up to tackle that one. And that's about it for now. There's some other stuff that probably isn't announced that I'm talking about.
Probably. Yeah.
But
is this when we need to get the mute button ready?
Yeah, exactly. Just like...
no, I'm not going to... Yeah, sorry.
It'll probably be soon, though, when you can talk about some of that.
Sure.
I was going to say BioShock. You did the butt, right?
Yes. Oh. The butt was mine. The butt, the Adonis butt of, was it Ryan? No, it wasn't Ryan. It was, God, what was his name? I don't even remember.
Oh, the leader dude?
Atlas. It was Atlas.
Yeah. His butt. We had a fan take a screen grab and send it, or just put a Twitter post out about this butt, saying, "I wonder who the artist was that had to work on the detail for this butt."
This guy.
So it's that guy.
You did a great job.
Great job.
Pretty terrible.
Great job.
Thank you.
So the art department, it has a vast array of specific disciplines. So what are some of those and like the roles that they play? Because you do the modeling.
Sure.
And then so before that, right, is...
So we've got concepting, obviously, which is sort of a multi-tiered thing. You have design on one side, coming up with gameplay and informing what that thing should look like. And then you have us as the character artists who have our own opinions and animation who also are trying to sort of breathe life into everything. So they all sort of feed into that, and then concept sort of comes up with the designs and the creative director and the art director will decide which one is the most appropriate, and once that's signed off for it sort of moves downstream to the modelers.
And so you're the next step in the process?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's see. So we're going to talk about, what is modeling? For people that don't know at all what modeling is. I mean, it's pretty much what it sounds, but in the digital world, it's...
Yeah, it's just creating a physical representation in the computer of the art asset that you want to put in the game. So the prop or the character or the environment, whatever it is, it's making a 3D version of that. And then there's a whole subsection of steps involved to get it from concept to block out to final production ready model that then gets animated and everybody gets to see.
Right, which we'll talk about a little bit. We have some concept art for Resistor, who we're kind of going to be using as our example for all of these art processes. So this is Resistor.
So I believe that's early concept, certainly. So this was one where I was on work for hire for probably the first third or half of this production, and so I wasn't a party to the meetings or the creation process. It was more like I helped out towards the end to help create the assets, but there were other artists who had worked on this prior to me, for sure.
Right. Yeah, so this wasn't done by Scott. He didn't do the concept for Resistor, but then worked on the modeling. We'll show some of his work.
And this
later.
is the question, like, I mean, as a modeler, it's your job to look at this and turn it into 3D, turn it into something real, right?
Sure. I mean, the concept artist hopefully informs us on what it should look like and sort of provides you with different angles, or if something is a little too abstract, you can go up to the concept artist and be like, I don't know what this is. And
in your case, like, we can't see a butt here, so I'm sure you're very interested in seeing the backside to understand exactly how to model that for the game.
I'm kind of good with butts, so I really don't need a lot of reference.
There it is. He's the butt man, ladies.
He knows.
And gentlemen.
Perfect butt artist.
Yeah, thanks twice, fried rice. I completely agree. So that's crazy. So, actually trying to visualize, going from a concept piece like this into 3D, like, do you need to see a lot more? Like, you mentioned different angles. Like, how much do you need to see, like, to really, like, visualize and, like, build the 3D model?
That depends. I mean, mostly it's a sense of proportion and scale, and if there's intricate stuff with the model, we'd want to get a call out from the concept artist, so you get up and talk to the concept artist.
And that's actually a great question too. Just talking about scale, in Drifters alone, we have quite a few characters of different sizes.
Sure.
So like taking a look at this, like Resistor compared to like Ziggy or Sumo, how do you know like how big they are comparatively? Like in a case where you have to implement, let's say specifically Resistor, do you have like a picture of Resistor next to Sumo? Or like Ziggy, like how do you actually know how to put them in the world?
So Concept will do lineups like that where they, design has some directive where they want something to look a certain way, and they can do a lineup of thumbnails and say, okay, well, this is our big fat character, this is our whatever. Mm-hmm. And so you'll get an idea from that. And then typically like one of the artists will do like the first character. So they'll do a prototype of whatever that is and whatever design deems right. And so when they home in on that size, they can start to, we want the skinny small character, we want and so everything will index off of sort of a baseline of a reference character, or the first character that we make. And so I think in this case it was Sumo. Sumo was the first one that we did.
Right. Which we haven't introduced yet, but
Shh. Oh.
We will. No. I mean, we've mentioned him, but we haven't done like an in-depth. You're allowed to talk.
No, you're fine. Also, you have a fan.
Love you, Scott Army.
That's said by
Galaxian.
Is this somebody I know?
Probably. But maybe not. It might be the butt guy.
It's probably someone on the team who's just trolling me.
I will say, if you guys are familiar with the Jack Nicholson and Adam Sandler movie, Anger Management, whenever they're having an inspirational moment under the bridge, Jack Nicholson takes Adam Sandler to meet a prostitute named Galaxia.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good reference. Thank you.
I wonder if Galaxian knows that.
Fun segue.
It's funny that who was that guy in the parliament?
Oh yeah,
that's Scott Army. He's the artist we're talking to.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Little Vagrant X wanted to know who it was.
Hey.
I feel like these are my coworkers and they're just like taking a huge crap on me right now.
Oh, someone's gonna see you on Thursday night. Ooh.
Okay.
He's into it, Fram. So that's great.
It's funny that talking about the
prostitutes.
The sizes of the characters and stuff.
Sure.
We had someone asked the other day about there was a model of Ziggy that was posted online.
Sure.
And why he had the tiny feet. Like they felt like it was a trend that was being followed, and it was what's with the big body and the small feet or small legs. And so I had asked James and Del if they wanted to weigh in, and it was kind of like, well, it's not just aesthetic purposes. It's we don't have, obviously we have a really wide array of characters and they have many different body types in this game, and the only ones that could really be described as having the big body, small legs is maybe Sumo and then Ziggy, of course. But they actually use those in their abilities. You know, like Sumo definitely uses it because he's more of a tank and needs the upper body. And then Ziggy, the reasoning for the art, department to make that decision was because he's a big ball of gas, and he can't fill out the suit completely. And he just hovers,
That makes a lot of sense.
So, and we answered the guy's question. He's like, oh, that actually, makes sense. I'm glad that these aren't just like random aesthetic choices. They all have,
I mean,
reasons.
There's backstory and certainly animation and they want to make these things look unique. And so in order to do that, they need to lean into that stuff a little bit more, I would say.
Right.
Rather than just like, oh, we're just going to make a bunch of bipedal humans. It's not super interesting, and it doesn't really play to the strengths of the IP on the whole. So I think working on that helps.
So we have an interesting question here that's related. So Twice Fried Rice is asking, you're mentioning different sizes for characters. How important is that for balancing combat when you do the 3D work? And what I feel like they're getting at, right, like we definitely know hitboxes are a thing. Right, so like take again like Ziggy, right? He's small. Does that mean he has like a small hitbox? Does that matter for him in game versus someone like Resistor who's skinny and like Sumo super wide?
I know that they were having issues with that, with hit detection and targeting specifically for characters, but that's more of a design related issue.
So as a character artist, you don't have to deal with that.
Well, we do. So nothing is in a vacuum, right? So like if design has an issue with a character and it's hard to use and it doesn't play well, they need to do things to make it better, but also not break the aesthetic. So, I mean, if that means you have to make the things wider, or everybody has to get 20% bigger, or whatever it is, like there is a back and forth there. So typically design will drive those sorts of conceits.
And a lot of that, is that thought of ahead of time? Like say even for instance, like, you build a tall character. Resistor's a little tall. Like how do you know he's going to fit in the door of like some room?
So I wish it was. Typically what'll happen is world building and design and environment art and character art will get together and they'll come up with a system of like units for everything. So this thing's going to be no higher than 2 meters and no wider than 1.5 meters, and everyone can jump this height, and everyone has to be able to fit through a door, so it's got to be at least that big. And
so you guys just have like a set of rules that you have to keep in mind.
Typically, world building has those rules, and it's pretty hopefully locked down so that like nothing character driven will break that. But yeah, sometimes that happens, and sometimes less so.
So we're mentioning a bunch of different steps of the process. I feel like we should talk about the process.
Well, yeah, the model. That was what I was going to jump to next.
Sorry.
Well, just asking. So the first steps when you're modeling. What are the first steps for modeling a character?
So we're actually working on a pipeline right now, but typically it'd be making a proxy model so that animation can get started, because it's another process that runs sort of in parallel with us and also with design. So the concept gets approved. We make a proxy model, which is a stand-in, and then that stand-in gets passed to animation so that they can start blocking out animations and getting timings down and all that. And from that, once that stuff sort of gets approved, then we'll move to a final proxy, which is a close approximation to the character, and if that's approved, we can move on to high poly, low poly, all those different sort of subset of steps to make the final asset. But you want to sort of lock in the other stuff
right
before you go through the trouble of making the final character, because it's very time consuming if you want to change things like 60% in.
Right. Because you have to change the whole foundation, basically.
Right, like you have to go back to the start. It's not like you can just stop what you're doing and like change the 3 things. It's
right.
Like everything goes back to the top, and then you have to remake the high poly. And
so what happens, let's say the proxy gets approved, what happens then?
The proxy is then sent to tech art to do rigging and skinning, and then it's moved on to animation so they can do block-ins.
Oh, so by this point, you've already done, as a character artist, you've already done a majority of your work.
No. So animation is a multi-tiered process that I'm sure someone else will talk to at some point in the future. But it, just like with the character art, there are like phases and layers to it. So you don't just, it's not like, hey, I want this character to run fast and do these things, and 2 minutes later you have all your animation set for the character. It's like, all right, well, how should it run fast, and what should it look like, and all these things. And so they block these things out in phases in much the same way as we'll do a proxy model before we do any high poly work, because we don't want it to be throwaway.
So what does that mean? I mean, I'm not sure how many of our viewers understand even proxy versus high poly. What's the goal there? And then also doing a low poly.
So proxy is just a block-in form. Like it can be as complex as a representation of the actual model built out of polys or blocks.
So what about that we have on screen right now?
That is a sculpt.
Okay.
So
that's like the first. That's like one of the first ones.
So
right?
yeah. After the proxy is done and everything. So the proxy is the first step in the whole thing. And proxy is needed so that animation can do the blockouts, and then design can then take that and use that in-game to see if things are working, or if visually it's what they want. If it's not, then we have to go back and fix the proxy, and then go through that. You'll do an iterative loop through that before you do an iterative loop through the high poly. Obviously, it's sort of flexible. I think this character went through a couple of redesigns.
I feel alone from that early concept we saw. Like, Resistor is definitely our punky character, but I feel like even you can see, like, in that first concept, he looked very like he could be like some punk concert, like in a mosh pit.
There were
versus where he ended up at.
Prior to that, though, I think maybe the story of it changed over time, but I know that like there were earlier concepts that looked nothing like this, and that was sort of like part of the design process, is figuring out which concept we want to lean into. But
I remember seeing all the concepts of changing, like just his hair.
Really?
There were so
his
many
hair
different
and his
types
head.
of
I mean,
things.
he used to have a completely different body style, and I think there were some that made him look more paramilitary, maybe like more knee pads and bandoliers and mag pouches and stuff like that.
But we just have the other two concepts.
No, I'm saying like
Star Wolf was asking if we have any of those to see.
Oh, yeah, no, sorry, I don't know they have any of those.
Those are in an archive somewhere.
Yeah.
Already.
Yes.
But yeah, so then you want to iterate when you're doing concept, and you want to iterate when you're doing like block out for animation and stuff like that, so that when we actually go into production making the model itself, we get as little of that as possible, because it's super disruptive and it's very expensive to have to pivot on one of these designs once this high poly model. I mean, another one of our artists made this, and I want to say it took maybe a couple months to do.
Oh wow!
Typically, it won't take quite that long, and the more that we do it, the quicker it gets. But I think for some of the earlier stuff, when we were in sort of pre-production or early production, there was a lot of like, let's see how this works, and then sometimes it would and sometimes it wouldn't, and people would have to sort of go back to the drawing board and really hammer on these things for a while. But it's a time-consuming process to get the high poly model like that.
So we got definitely like the actual 3D aspect. I have a couple fun questions. So I think a common thing that a lot of players see, especially when characters glitch out, and we could even see in that previous screen there on the sculpt, T-pose. Everyone's in some sort of a T-pose at all times. Why is T-pose the thing to like?
Actually, that's a modified A-pose.
Oh, excuse me. It did look rather not T, but down here, but still. What's the deal?
Does ballet help in any of this?
No, yeah. So for to make things easier for downstream departments, so for instance, like rigging and skinning, we build them in these poses so that it's easier for them to sort of skin around the model. If things are super tight to the body and it's really difficult to access faces or verts, it makes it really hard for them to do their job, which is not impossible, but there's that, and there's also range of motion. You tend to build these things halfway between whatever extremes you want them to be able to pose into. So if you just build them like this, they'll be able to do this perfectly, which is a really hard pose to hit. But then when you get down here, you might have issues, and then when you get down here, you're going to have real problems in the shoulders. So you set a
T-pose is a nice compromise.
A pose.
Oh, A pose is the compromise.
Technically, you want something more like a relaxed A pose, where the arms are everything's slightly bent.
Oh, not just like.
No. Yeah. Well,
I don't know if you can see that through the camera.
Posture-wise, you'd want the posture to be fully upright, but you would want a modified A pose for, and you can even see that if you like on like ArtStation or something, or ZBrush Central, you'll see guys doing their stuff for like Naughty Dog or other places, and it'll just be kind of like this sort of modified A pose where like the hands are slightly flexed and you know the muscles are somewhere in between being flexed and super
you can
rigid
kind of see
straight.
it in this one. He's kind of got
he clearly has a little bit of bent there on his arm.
Sure. And in this case, like because of the way we're doing the grapple system, the arm, the left arm in this case was a giant mechanical thing that was modeled separately, and then probably put into the file, but. It's completely asymmetrical in that regard.
Interesting. So another question that we have, I guess, is like how does like we obviously see the model, but you know with the characters in game obviously have color. You know they all have like the way they look, right? Like in Resistor's case, like his clothing definitely looks a little beat up.
Sure.
What is that process of getting this grayscale model to actually have?
So
what we know to be textures.
Well, there's a lot. There's a whole middle ground before that. I mean, we still have to retopologize it.
Sorry, what?
Retopologize. Game ready model.
Yeah.
Okay, so your sculpt is like a 60 million triangle thing. Am I making too much noise or something?
No.
And in order to get that in the game, you obviously can't have something that's 60 million triangles. So you retopologize, making like a nice looking low poly mesh that deforms right and everyone can use downstream from you. And so that's the model that you then make all your normal maps and your AO maps and your curvature maps and all that stuff. And you bake it. Basically, it's a height difference from the high poly to the low poly. It'll actually send out rays.
So you're losing a lot of terms here that, as a mere engineer, I can't keep up with. So maps. So we're saying like you go from point A to point B.
Well, these are maps that you would. Our current pipeline, we use Substance Painter almost exclusively, at least for this game. And so we'll bake all those maps inside of Painter. And that's like your setup. So your low poly model then has
none of that. Bake a map.
Yeah.
Well, no, he's asking what is a map.
Yeah.
It's just a texture. It's like a photo that's created based off of some complex math and ray tracing.
So like say like Resistor in this case wears like a jacket/vest thingy.
Yeah.
What would his map be for that? Like how do you actually?
So. The first part of that step is obviously to bake all your maps. Baking is a technical term for just using a ray tracer, which is it sends out beams of, I don't know if it's beams of light that go out and detect the difference between like the low poly model and your high poly sculpt. And it'll generate a normal map, a curvature map, and a bunch of other maps that are just sort of foundational.
So that kind of gives depth in a sense.
Sure.
Like it's the difference of telling like I have a jacket versus a shirt.
Well, it gives you the illusion of like the folds in your shirt, right?
Oh, okay.
And so we get that, and based on that, we can then use that in Substance Painter to start painting the textures. And so what you see right there is a flat render of just the color information without the materials or shaders applied. So your color information is your textures, your pictures that you paint, the color, the whatever.
Yeah.
And then the shader is actually all the physical properties of that. So is it shiny like metal? Is it flat like leather? Or is it, like fabric? Does it have a twill pattern on it? That sort of thing.
One of my favorite people in the world. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, just 3D art makes extensive use of the Thomas Guide maps. Sorry, that was from James. I had to point that one out.
I totally missed that. I read that. I missed
We
that.
also had Twice Fried Rice said that it looks awesome. I definitely see potential for adding cool skins in the aesthetic you're using, which I think there is.
Yeah, in general, the game is definitely planning on having skins and whatnot. Going free to play, that's going to be definitely part of our plan for monetization is the ability to customize your character with a bunch of different everything.
Yeah, for sure. We're actually working on that pipeline right now too.
Oh, snap, son. So I had a question still related to the process. I was saying, like, one of my favorite people that used to work here, but he's still one of my favorite people in general. He always used to come into my engineering interviews and be like, hey, so if I were to throw at you 1101110, that would obviously mean this. And he would say it as like a joke because like that's nonsense garbage. He's an artist that's trying to tell me like, oh, what is this about?
It's a talking binary.
And he was really good at it, like pulling my strings and being able to like just taunt me. And I would just react very poorly. I'd get all pissy, like, meh, 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 meh.
This is good to know.
I'm trying to think about who artist is this.
So I finally
there were only 4.
I finally had him one time, and I went up to him and was like, hey, so gonna unwrap some textures today, get those UVs going. And that just made him boil. And I was surprised because I just was using keywords that I didn't know what they meant. This was Galen, of course.
Oh, yes.
So I'm curious, though. Can you tell us about what unwrapping is and what UVs
I see
are?
like UVW unwrap as one of our terms.
Yeah.
And
So,
I don't know what this means.
Yeah, super easy. It's essentially cutting seams in the low poly model so that you can flatten them out in a 2D plane to do your textures. It's essentially like tailoring, if you think about tailoring like a jacket, but in reverse. So it'd be like you cut seams in this thing so that you can flatten it out. And
see the pattern.
Yeah, you can't texture on the backside of this if it's like a 3D object in 3D space. So you flatten it out and flay it.
So instead of doing color by number, well, no, maybe that's what you are doing. You're doing color by number instead of taking the model itself and like painting it in.
Well, I mean, if you were to do something like not UV it, is like P-Tex, but nobody uses that. I don't think it's very performant.
I mean, obviously.
But that's basically that's UVing per poly face, so you don't need to UV. Every single face gets its own UV space.
Okay.
And you don't have to UV it.
And UVing is
what we were just talking about.
Yeah, cutting up the model. Cutting up the model in a 3D program and laying it out flat in a 2D plane. Then taking a snapshot of that so that you can then...
So that's why it's called unwrapping.
It's so
You're
funny.
like literally unwrapping.
Yeah, like if you think about or like wrapping yourself in plastic and then just like...
Here's a mold of me.
Or like a dead animal when you gut it and rip off the skin.
That's a much more relatable example.
That you should teach classes and use that as.
Sorry, yeah. So like if you
this one is
if you kill a deer and you cut off the body and lay out the fur on like a rug, that's like UV unwrapping.
There it is.
There we go.
You like doing that? You'll make a great artist.
Well, it's so funny that engineering. We think of engineering, especially for me, like as the technical. Like, there's no way I'd know what any of that stuff is.
Oh no, art has me beat by like 1,000
times. But art
is,
especially in games when you get into 3D, it's insane. Like, so how the technical
really not
stuff.
That much to do.
What?
Well, especially like engineering is so objective. Like, it either works or it doesn't work. And like art, on top of the objective things, you add the subjectivity of, is this good enough? And it's like, on code, I'm like, it runs, so yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you have performance metrics, though, right? Like, you guys have to profile things and make sure it runs at a specific speed and does all this stuff.
Sorry. James is saying that next time on the BSG stream, we'll have PETA on, explaining the thoughts and views of Scout Army do not reflect the views of BSG or its employees.
Who is James?
Your art director.
Oh, that's Garcia. All right. Sorry, a little too visceral for everyone there.
You can use a stuffed animal.
Yeah, they're probably like laughing at me out there. It's the worst.
No, but
you're doing fantastic.
Look at you in your little. No, I'm sorry, I cut you off though. So, I guess we were recapping. Really just the end goal of the UV.
The unwrapping.
Yeah, that's just set up for texture. So, like, if you were just to throw textures on something, you need that base to be able to put the textures on.
Mm-hmm.
So when you bake out your actual final textures, if you look at it, it'll match the UVs.
Nice.
So you need that model that you bring into Substance Painter and you bake all your maps.
So now that we've talked about this whole process, you mentioned early on in stages, it's hard to like know the production pipeline for making a character, even getting that sculpting done. But then we just talked about all these other things in terms of making a high poly model, low poly, doing the unwrapping, doing the textures. So what's the full timeline for making a character from scratch here?
I mean, that's sort of subjective.
See, what did I just say? I just went on this whole rant.
Depends on the artist. It depends on how much time we have. It depends on if there's feedback loops and the whole thing.
Yeah, if they're given
like
as much
in
time,
an idealized thing, I think the guys on the team can probably finish a character in about 8 to 12 weeks, probably.
Damn, son.
From concept to, or
well, I mean,
concept sometimes takes a while.
Concept is sort of out of our purview. We give feedback on it, but
those are for the real creatives.
Well, sure. Yeah, air quotes. We play a role in it, but you're just talking about the production of creating an asset. I'm guessing it's like 8 to 12 weeks.
Nice.
And then it's much longer. If you're looking at this stuff is highly stylized, and if you're looking at something like a Naughty Dog type thing, you're looking at months and months.
Just because the amount of detail.
Yeah, they do blend shapes, and they're trying to hit photorealism, and they get hair, and when you start doing all that stuff, you're looking at half a year, or 4 months.
Oh yeah,
something.
I'm sure. You look at some of these games, I can't even imagine for stuff like Red Dead and
those things,
Skyrim and stuff like that, where you're going with realism.
Yeah, but these things right here probably, in a pinch, we could probably get something that we were not super happy without in 6 or 7 weeks.
So the ideal.
Yeah, obviously.
But if you're talking final in-game asset that everyone's super happy with, and we can sign off and say, all right, let's move on to the next one. It's probably 8 to 12 weeks would be my guess.
Sorry, I was just checking Discord to see if we have any questions, but no, not yet.
Do we have any other? What's the next picture on the queue?
Okay, there's his jetpack.
So no, that's his arm.
To the right.
Oh, it's the rocket.
He can't see the rocket on the right.
Yeah. So I wasn't super involved with this character. I did a tiny bit of sculpt work on the grapple arm that you see here. And when I say tiny, I mean very small amount.
And that's the picture in the middle on the left, correct?
Yeah, sorry, on the left. And on the right is the rocket. And so the rocket, I did the whole thing from start to finish. So high poly, low poly, UVs, all of it. But these are sort of intermediary, very early, just throwing smart materials from Substance Painter on the thing to get an idea about how the material breakup should be on it. So what kind of metal should go where, and how shiny should the painted red metal be, and
oh wow,
what does rubber look like? And so this was literally a half a day job where I just sort of got the stuff in and got it working.
Wow.
And then based on, the principal character artist did the textures for basically the rest of him. So the head, the body, and all that, and he drove a lot of what the look was because he had done a lot of the legwork for Sumo, which was sort of our visual target at the beginning. And so he had a pretty good understanding about how everything should be set up, and based on that, we did a pretty substantial shift from this. This is more sort of straight ahead PBR, and PBR is physically based rendering, so using math to generate how metal something is or how specular something is.
Sounds gross.
Sure.
Do you spend a lot of time just studying textures?
Not really. No. No, for the stylized stuff, it's more about hitting a look, and it really doesn't matter so much. Which isn't to say that you shouldn't study the way stuff looks. You study the way things look, but I'm not spending an exorbitant amount of time looking at painted tin cans or something to get my stuff down. It's more figuring out stylized how this thing is supposed to be, and then
So we have another fun question from Twice Fried Rice. He asked, so 8 to 12 weeks to make it, cool, but what about animation, voice work, those kinds of things?
Again, that's sort of outside of my purview.
But that's I think inherently the question. That's 8 to 12 weeks for you to just basically do your job.
Yes.
For completing
So animation isn't in that 8 to 12.
No, but again, a lot of those things are running in parallel to one another. So because we make that proxy and that thing gets rigged and skinned and they start blocking out animations, if you look at it, the proxy work for the character and animation first pass is right here, and this stuff sort of runs along in parallel.
Okay.
So nothing is done in a bubble, and nothing is independent of anything else. Obviously, we want to have the look of the thing established and finalized before we get started on the actual physical art. But that doesn't mean that, animation can't be halfway through the process.
Yeah, and then like something like voice work, I know is just completely outside of all of that. Voice work, can be done.
That's kind of like that's way towards the end.
Post-production, yeah.
Yeah, that's...
we need the character to be completely working. We need to know the timeline of how much voice work we need. Right now we're still establishing where we want voice to go in the game even.
Yeah, that's not even like on our radar really right now because it's...
But it will be there. So, so there's you're absolutely right. In a game like ours where a character, I feel like, is a very central part of the game, it's not just, you're this random soldier on the battlefield. It's like, no. Your character is very much who you are. It represents who you are in the battle or in the, gameplay, right? There's going to be a lot of detail to these. So I think all of this, like in our game in particular, right? Like, yeah, we definitely are putting a lot of work into that. Whereas, maybe a game, such as Battlefield, not that they don't put work into it, but, it's just, what maybe sounds like a generic soldier voice versus like each heavily individualized character.
These are going to be like character voices. They're going to have to match the wacky physical demands that they all have.
Absolutely. So, Scott, we've talked a lot about the actual process of the character. I feel like we covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else you kind of want to add that, like, maybe we didn't cover for what it means to, like, or what it means or takes to make a character? Well, you heard it here, folks.
Nah, I'm good.
You don't know how hard it was to get him to come on to this today.
He did great.
So he's doing
great.
He's
We're not
doing
done
fantastic.
Yet.
Oh no, you're not done. No time.
Gotta go.
No. Oh, I also wanted to add, if you guys have any questions about Resistor, feel free to ask. Yeah, he was very worried. He doesn't know much about the actual abilities of Resistor, other than what he's building.
Yeah.
But the details, I do have some info on that.
Hey, I textured that. Sorry, that's his gun, the gyrojet. I think.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's his
the gyrojet rifle, which I actually have a thing here. Let me read.
Here, if I may,
this was from Del. I had Del write out, like, our lead designer. Oh yeah.
Can I cover this question real quick for Scott? So, Mel asks, was there ever a character you disliked to make but you still had to because it's your job on like a personal level, like someone you were just? Like...
He's gonna say like all of them.
Not really.
Oh.
No.
So you've enjoyed making all the characters you have, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. It's it's more like the task work. It's not like the asset itself. So like sometimes you have to do a lot.
You hate the process.
Yeah, like sometimes you're like, oh, we got a bunch of stuff, and it's just not fun to do. Or you got to retopologize this model because everyone else is busy doing something, and so the process is more the thing that sometimes is a little grating. Not the assets themselves, and there's been nothing that I've worked on that I didn't enjoy.
Oh, that's good.
Especially that butt.
Yep.
What?
I had an idea before the round starts. They could be in a bar or restaurant setting and talk to one another, have funny banter.
You're not wrong. I mean,
actually, it's funny that you say that. There are plans for that already in the works.
It's like Twice Fried Rice knows the game really well.
Yeah, wait a sec. Who is this?
If I could do the meme of like FBI wants to know your location, that's what I would do right now.
Because we also have the Vault comic stuff, so there's that.
We're watching you. No, but you're absolutely right. Like, there's a lot that we want to act with. Oh, Mel says, Retopo is pure fun.
I actually don't mind it. I don't mind you being in Retopo a lot, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes if you have to do a lot of it, it's a kind of a pain, but it can be one of those things where you can just, you don't have to stress about it too much. You can just sort of check out. And
is there anything you like the least? Like, definitively?
Skinning. I don't like skinning because I don't really know how to do it.
That's a good reason.
I've been trying to learn, but that's more animation than us. I mean, it helps to know that stuff a little bit. Just so it informs how you make your low poly model because you know how it should be skinned, but I don't enjoy that. I don't know. I like Retopo more than I like UVing.
We'll have one of our animators on in a couple weeks. So those questions about skinning and stuff will be reserved for Brian when he comes on.
Oh, he's on.
Fuck off!
I don't know if this is a joke or not. Is his iron sight a speed square?
Is his iron sight a speed square?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't design it. You mean like a square, like a carpenter square?
Like a carpenter square.
That's why I don't know. I don't work with
probably not.
So I'm not familiar with that. Question from KPT Crispy. Will the characters have handsome voices?
That's a big decision. I think they should all have handsome voices.
I just realized that's probably Captain Crispy, now that I think about that.
Define handsome?
It's a construction tool, yes. Yeah, that's my fault. I don't work with my hands. I actually was doing a word association test, and I didn't know what a trivial. What's the
trivial? Yeah, or the thing that the round-looking thing. Wait, are you talking about Dremel?
No, trowel. It's like a shovel.
A trowel.
Trowel.
Jeez.
Oh. Good lord.
A trowel.
Yeah.
So we have this is the gyrojet rifle, which is Resistor's main weapon. And it says fast firing, unpredictable, does low damage at a devastating rate. In addition, multiple hits with this weapon will eventually tag a target with a nano tracker. This tracker is valuable for how it supports his first ability, which is the rocket launcher. And Resistor can swap to a rocket launcher that self-generates ammo over time and allows him to toggle back and forth between gyrojet and rockets for maximum carnage.
Oh, so he has rockets as well.
Yeah, and because the rocket that he has on his back is his drift pack, and it's also a weapon.
Charles, what now?
So it says, however, the rockets fired on their own eventually become drunken and inaccurate over time.
Classic, myself.
Right, like Dom. We'll put his face on one of them. This is why it's vital for Resistor to get a tracker tag on his opponent, so the rockets will have something to home in on. Then they become much more efficient at finding and delivering explosive damage to their opponent. Even a miss has the ability to knock opponents around with strong impulse effects. He also has a cool one that he adds. His second ability is called Corruptor. And it's a nano program that can be applied to objects in the world, like health packs, loot containers, or plunder chests. And when an opponent interacts with these items, a digital death head manifests at the location of the object.
That's very intense.
And once fully formed, it will start moving toward and tracking the enemy that sprung the trap. And the death head can fly through walls, gain speed over time, and often the best solution for the target is just to run like mad until the program runs its course. A hit from the death head will result in visual corruption and damage to the target player for a period of time. It's essentially a curse. Yeah, and then his super is Misguided Missile. Once Resistor's super has fully powered up, he can launch the enormous missile he carries on his back, which is also his drift pack. And in this state, the missile will become a self-guided projectile that Resistor controls. He can maneuver it toward an opponent or objective to do devastating damage to his target. But if you're playing Resistor, you have to be careful because his own body is vulnerable to attack when he's got his missile going. And so death would obviously disrupt Resistor's control of the missile.
As it turns out.
So, and like all our characters, every single character in this game, it has a grapple, which makes it unique. It's not something that you find or, it's everyone comes with a grapple and a drift pack.
That way you can get around in space.
Yeah, and the grapple can also act as a weapon.
Sure can, depend on the character.
Yeah,
that depends on the character.
You can throw people.
Now, Captain Crispy here asking the real questions. Are the characters single? So what I'll say to that is no comment, because Vault Comics, who we've plugged before, they're definitely working with us to help define the universe a lot more.
Right, and they're going to be doing a comic.
We're definitely going to save a lot of that kind of background story that's that in-depth for those comic releases and things like that.
Yeah.
So you'll definitely be finding out some about that for some of the characters later on. And it'll definitely be something that we show off in that case. We definitely want you to have a sense of who they are, kind of get a sense of their personality. But a lot of those types of details, which we definitely are into, will definitely be coming from the comic book angle.
Right.
Because the game itself, because of the nature of the gameplay, in terms of very quick action, 15-minute, fast-paced rounds, right, you're not going to get that intense story that's there, but we want you to feel like you know the characters and who they are.
Well, just because the characters are so unique, they're unique looking, and it put a lot of, design and artists put a lot of time and energy into making these characters unique. They were really conducive to a comic series, which is why they wanted to work with us and we wanted to work with them, is because those stories need to be told, but not necessarily in the gameplay mode.
Yeah, and I think it's just in reality, the characters, in a lot of sense, the game itself has this whole sarcastic vibe, some of them asshole-ish. And that's just really representative of the studio as a whole.
We have Twice Fried Rice said that they're not an insider on our project.
I really thought.
They're a huge fan of the skilled character genre as a streamer.
And by all means, I'm not actually trying to like push you away, Twice Fried Rice. I just think it's fun. I got Hayden.
Assholeish. That's our creative director. We didn't know you were watching.
Yeah. But Twice Fried Rice, by all means, no. I think it's great. You have great ideas, and I mean, I think it represents that because we're definitely doing some of them.
Yeah.
I see you too, Hayden. I love you, buddy. You're definitely not a sarcastic asshole in any means.
We didn't say who.
With just a few minutes left, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say I have a few other questions for Scott.
Well, okay.
Sorry, Scott, you're not off the hook yet.
Check Discord again.
Anyone famous slated to write comics, illustrate? We do have some really cool people involved in it. I don't know if I'm allowed to say. Well, no, they've been tweeting it. Come back to next stream and I'll be able to say. Okay, so it's Vault Comics.
Hayden's saying it. There you go.
Vault Comics, and it's 3 of their guys. I know Tim Seeley, Michael Morrissey, and Elliot Ray Hall, and they do some awesome work.
That's Leo. Hey, Leo. Wells Mel's asking, do you know the 3D Festival FMX in Stuttgart?
What?
3D Festival FMX?
No.
In Stuttgart? Okay, he's not really
Brian,
worldly, so
but they want a presentation
of Blind
Squirrels.
Yeah, it would be
at
so awesome.
The 3D
Apparently
Festival.
Fit in, so we'll have to consider that.
You can go to Stuttgart.
Stuttgart.
Are you from Stuttgart, Mel?
We'll find out shortly.
And are we pronouncing that correctly?
Stuttgart.
I mean, I've seen it spelled a bunch of times. I don't know if I've actually heard it pronounced.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't do this streaming thing.
Yeah, you're doing great, champ.
I'm not looking at you guys. Wait, what?
Let's get to the question. Sorry.
I was just going to ask, what knowledge do you think is important for an artist wanting to break into the game industry?
Just hard work, really. Hard work more than anything else. The internet, you can find answers to everything that you want on the internet now. And so just mileage and stick-to-itiveness, I guess.
Is there any specific path you would suggest? Like, you took the QA route.
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't get into 3D until I was, like, 27. So I was pretty old.
So old.
I'm way older now. But yeah, I don't know. Like, if you want to go to school for it, I know some people who've had some real great success going to places like Nomon or Full Sail or, like that route. I don't think it's necessary. I think like if you're good at art, you're good at art, and if you're passionate about it, you can get better quickly if you do a lot of art in your own time. Certainly.
Right.
Here's a great question, and I take it back. I want to say one more thing because Wellmo's being really cool right now. So, no, you don't have to apologize for your English, but they're saying they're not from Stuttgart. But they're saying it's a pretty big festival. So they have Ubisoft, Blue Studio. Is that Blue Byte? Like the guys doing Anno? But either way, I mean, I'd go to Europe. I don't do 3D art, so I'd be useless. Oh, you know what? Mimi and I will go.
We'll do all the talks. Give me all your notes, guys.
But Galaxian has a great question. How much traditional art should a character artist like yourself learn to be successful in the industry?
The more you know, the better. I am not a huge traditional artist. I would sketch when I was young, but I never envisioned doing this as a job, so I didn't pursue it in school. Certainly, if you know anatomy and stuff like that, it can be extremely helpful. And if you're good at 2D illustration, it can also be very helpful. I think it's easier for a person who knows that stuff to learn 3D than it is for a 3D artist to go the other way around, for sure.
Oh, interesting. So it gives you a good foundation, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it can't hurt, right? Like when you're painting textures, if you're doing hand-painted stuff, that's a skill set in and of itself.
That's fantastic. Captain Crispy, thanks for hosting me, or us, I should say. And then he had a question for me, is what I was going to say. How do you maintain that sexy beard? So lots of...
Define sexy.
Blood of the Innocent is generally where I start off with. My general alcohol regimen with lack of any food is also what keeps it nice and shiny because my body is trying to secrete anything to tell me I need to stop drinking so much. And then finally, I have a bone-carved just like comb that I got from a source, and I just combed that naturally.
Beard oil?
So
it was a little bit more complex than beard oil, apparently.
No, actually, you know what's funny? Actually, a lot of people think my ethnicity is actually like Persian or some sort of like Middle Eastern like origin, but it's actually Native American is majority what I am.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think that's just it would, the other part of me is Hispanic, like Mexican and Spanish. And it's just funny because I don't see a lot of other Mexicans that have like a similar beard. Like obviously Mexicans have beards, but I think it actually is the Native American side where this comes from, which is crazy. So I don't have to do a lot. Thanks. I don't do a lot of work for it. I just like. Scott Army, what's your take on burritos as a food source? Yes, Scott Army. Tell us how you like burritos.
See, the goal of this whole thing was not to get fired by saying something super inappropriate. And who is it?
Don't forget your children are watching.
Yeah. Ooh, I forgot that. Sorry, Scott's kids. That's on me.
Did you swear?
He said.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, it's out of the.
I said prostitute.
Yeah, you had a whole conversation
I don't know
about
what that is. It's a terrible food stuff, and I don't ever imbibe.
You know what? Let's just start the train. How do you feel about Crocs? As in the shoes.
Amazing.
Well, I mean.
Oh my god.
Oh, that's not where I was expecting this to go.
Yeah, see?
I have 2 pairs myself.
And Swamp Shaman knows what it's about. We like cumin. We're fans of that. Yes, we are.
Again, I don't want to say anything to get myself in trouble.
Too late. Yeah, too late, buddy. What was the other thing I just got you on
I did
about?
have a friend that used to call cumin the BO spice.
Not wrong.
Yeah, I still.
BO? Oh.
Body odor?
They said it's
Yeah, I know.
Like,
it permeates?
I just equate it more with dirt.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
See?
no, they just said it tasted like BO smelled. Like, that was why.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know.
Yeah, dirt.
So,
Thanks.
I guess, so either path in general works fine. Like, if you take the QA route, like, I think one big to summarize that I can even equate or relate to on the engineering side, either way it takes a ton of work. Just because you go to a school that focuses on game art or game engineering or game anything doesn't mean you don't have to put in extra time. So like even in QA route, right? Like what gets you your foot in the door on either side is your own personal projects. That's going to be a big part of it.
Yes, like networking is part of it. Being able to just do the work is a huge component of it. Like and having like production experience is like the sort of third component, which unfortunately you have to work at a place to get. But
that's what I'm trying to say. Like still for me, like when I look at an entry-level resume, like what sets any person apart, they can go to like whatever game school is amazing out there. But if I don't see something they've done on their own, like versus like in a team setting,
sure,
like I will obviously talk to them, but I'm less engaged. Like I'm expecting less out of them because like they don't have that drive. Like to me, it's like, oh well, I want a job in games, so obviously I did the easiest route in.
Sure.
It's like that's not how this works, and not because like they're not good at what they do. It's just like inherently the problems you deal with in gaming are very difficult.
Well, that's like the experience thing, right? Like
yeah.
you get people who are amazing artists who have no production experience, and so they don't do things that are conducive to a tight ship being run, you know?
Right,
it's kind
exactly.
of like they do things their own way, and it ends up being not the best way to do them, sort of deal.
Yeah. No, that's and it's totally true.
Well, and it seems like, you know, the route that Scott took with a self-taught route just requires a lot more discipline. Because, you know, a lot of people go to school for it, and it's basically you're learning the same information. It's just one route. You've got to make sure that you're keeping yourself to it.
Totally. And I think
you're not
that's
getting up
true.
at 8 a.m. because you have a scheduled class. It's I need to find the time to
right.
make sure I know.
I need to work my ass off, basically.
Right.
I mean, I basically stopped playing games for a long time just to learn this. Like, this was what I did in my spare time.
I will say it's surprising how many of us in the industry don't have time to play games.
don't have time to play games.
You know, guys, Eric is giving us the signal where we've hit our 1 o'clock mark. So thanks so much for all the questions today, and thanks for me, everyone new that I haven't seen, Captain Crispy, Wellmel, Galaxian, but I feel like I know who you are.
Galaxian's in the office.
Yeah, Leo, what up, son? I'll see you Thursday.
And Wellmel, we'll look into this.
Yeah.
Into this festival.
We'd love to go to
Blue
Europe.
Sky Weta. Yeah.
Go to Europe. Have
look
fun
into
into
it.
spring. Is it a spring conference, a summer conference?
Okay, we're gonna go now.
Yeah. I've been on Twitter. Oh, dope.
Yes,
okay.
I've seen.
Okay, I don't. She's on the Twitter. I'm not. I'm not good with the technology. I'm on Reddit. Oh, subreddit, Drifters Game, and then join our Discord.
What's Reddit?
There we go. Perfect.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week at 12.
Bye, guys.
Bye.